Well, as long as my last video was about this topic, I still forgot to mention a few things, and I rewatched my video and noticed that I didn't really explain some things that well, so I'll start off with those and then I'll get to the new stuff later. Okay, so if you watched the last video, you might remember that I said my new controls for taking cover wouldn't affect climbing up objects, but it would for climbing over and hanging on railings or vaulting over them. Well, that's not accurate because it would affect them, but it just wouldn't affect climbing on waist-high objects. Okay, so to elaborate on this a little bit more, I thought I'd use Splinter Cell Blacklist as an example. So when you're approaching a wall like this, you just press the triangle button and he vaults over because it's not a very tall wall. But when you come across a taller wall like this, then you would have to either press triangle and he would climb to the top and hang. From there you could shoot, throw grenades. But then if you're approaching it and you hold triangle, he'll climb up and over the wall. You hold triangle to Fulton objects like the container, but I think as long as you're in the climbing animation, it wouldn't do it. And once you're on top of the container, then you can hold triangle to Fulton it. As long as you're not running towards the container and holding triangle, all you gotta do is stand still and then hold triangle to Fulton it. You could take cover next to the container just by pressing triangle, not holding it. These controls would not affect jumping off rooftops or jumping across gaps. Okay, so another ability that also relates to climbing up a wall and hanging is, of course, climbing and then hanging from the ledge of a window. So from here, Snake could use his prosthetic arm to lure the guard over to the window, and then he could pull him out. And of course, you'll also be able to shoot from a window ledge or throw grenades. A few more abilities I think would fit really well into Metal Gear is to be able to climb up pipes like this. And I know you have that already, it's just a much bigger pipe in this video. But I'd also like to be able to climb along ledges of buildings really quick like this. When you try this in Ground Zeroes, you move pretty slow. And then of course also shimmying along the wall. That brings me back to the topic of being able to climb trees and hang from branches like you could in Metal Gear 3. And since the African jungles in Metal Gear 5, it seems like we would at least have a few trees once in a while that we could still do this on. And you know, it's in there for a reason to begin with in Metal Gear 3, so I don't see why we still couldn't have that ability. But not just hanging from a branch, also standing on top of it, because you can get a better shot sometimes. If you slowly approach the edge of a rooftop in Ground Zeroes, Snake automatically grabs on, and if you combine this with a game like Splinter Cell, you could do the same thing, but then you could shoot or throw grenades from here. But if you go too fast, you will automatically fall off. Something I want to correct real quick is that when I was talking about the new item wheel, I accidentally showed this picture of the weapon wheel, but the item wheel looks the same. They both have 8 slots, which would hopefully be enough room for both the iDroid and binoculars, along with all of the other gadgets that Snake might have with him. When I was talking about how to make playing dead while laying on your stomach more convincing, I meant to show a screenshot of this here, and that's the position that I was describing. And the stars floating above the guy's head reminded me of the tagging system in MGO 3 and how it shows you the status of the person that's been tagged. So if you've already been tagged, playing dead wouldn't really work for you because people would know you're faking it. But there should be some kind of SOP stealth skill that prevents you from being tagged, but also a skill that lets you know that you've been tagged. I forgot to mention the controls for changing viewpoints while driving a vehicle, and I would just stick with the same idea as using binoculars while in the box, and you just press L3. It's pretty useless though if you're driving backwards because Snake just looks off to the side, so I won't be using it. Speaking of using the binoculars while in the box, I realized that there is one small drawback to that, and you wouldn't be able to use the camera alignment feature by sitting still and pressing L3, but I think that's a small sacrifice in order to have a more classic Metal Gear style controls. So you'll just have to rely on turning the camera yourself, but if you think about it, in Ground Zeroes you didn't even have a box or the camera alignment feature. And when I was talking about how I wanted to be able to run and stab, I should have clarified that that would be a skill that you would unlock, and it could be Blades EX, and it would be the highest form of blade skill. And then basically you could play just like Vamp. thought of another reason why I think we need a knife, and that is for team sneak. In that game mode, the only way the stealth team could kill is with a knife, unless you stun someone and took their gun and used it against them. Something else though is you always looked for like a floating knife or gun in the air, and that's how you would spot people. But now since you put your guns or weapons away automatically, I'm wondering how hard it'll be to spot people, especially at nighttime. It would be nice if your stealth camo wouldn't go off if you didn't get spotted, and it only went off for the person who did.
Oops, but it does look like they're equipped with helmets, meaning we can't just go ahead and headshot them with our tranquilizer.
Okay, so what are you supposed to do in Team Sneak then if the enemy has body armor and helmets? Are you not able to headshot stun them? I mean, that would be completely unfair, unbalanced. So I really feel like equipment should not have an effect on gameplay. And if it does, I guess we can still hold up the enemy, but the stun knife would also be useful against guys wearing body armor.
That we can use to deliver an electric charge to an enemy through his armor and knock him out.
Other than that, the only way to headshot stun someone that's wearing a helmet is to shoot him in the face, and not all the helmets have their faces uncovered. When I was talking about how I don't like how the camera changes when you throw someone down, this isn't really an issue in the single player mode because Snake stuns in one hit, but I don't imagine the CQC being that powerful on MGO unless you are playing as Snake or maybe Ocelot. But you know, if you're using like a lower level CQC, it shouldn't have the camera change. That way you can still do the old headshot stun moves or headshot kill. The last video made it sound like I didn't want the dive move anymore and I just wanted to replace it with the old dive and roll move, but that's not true. I do want the dive to stay in the game because it does have its uses. You can dive down to the ground and get into a stable sniping position fast, or you can dive in behind cover really quick. I just didn't want that to be the only option, so I wanted the old dodge moves back, and those would be accessible only while aiming. And you know, it used to be you have to hold the dive button while diving and rolling in order to lay down, so I kind of like being able to do it quick. This headshot execution move would be dependent on what skills you had selected. Just like in MGO, you had the CQC paired up with Blades 3 to do the throat slit. And I also think that it would be useful for people who are not good at headshots, and also maybe bring back the classic neck break move, but with a more updated look and sound. There are some really unique gadgets in Splinter Cell Blacklist, like the tri-rotor, the sticky camera, and the proximity shocker. And I think this would work really well in the Metal Gear game and on MGO. Now, when you throw the sticky camera, you can look around the room, and I remember there was something like this on MGO 1 where you had cameras you could access to see around corners and stuff, and that wasn't even in MGO 2, and I thought that would be cool to bring it back. And you can attract the enemy, and well, that won't work on multiplayer, but single player, you can flash detonate like this or release sleeping gas. The proximity shocker would be pretty good in single player, but I think it would be overpowered in the multiplayer, especially in something like Team Sneak. Now the tri-rotor is my favorite gadget because, as you can see, you can fly in the air, you can attract the enemy, you can shock them, and this would definitely be cool in the single player. I don't think it would be in the multiplayer either. And you know, you did have the Metal Gear Mark II robot in the multiplayer, but it was always a problem climbing stairs. You could at least stun people though. When you aim a sniper rifle on Splinter Cell Blacklist, you'll notice that you can see around the scope, and I really like that because it represents your peripheral vision, and if you're aiming at someone and someone else is coming from the side, you can set up for another shot easier. Metal Gear 5 just has like a black outline around the scope, and you know, I don't know how long it would take to like redraw this and reprogram it, but it sure would be nice to have. It would also be nice to have some places in MGO where you could go and refill your ammo and not have to go back to your spawn. This would be a similar idea to the ammo supply houses in the single player. Something I really liked in MGO I forgot to mention, and I already tweeted this, but I figured I'd include it in the video for people on YouTube, but I definitely want the non-stat mode back where it doesn't record your stats, and this was a good way to practice and learn the game. But another way to practice and learn the game was combat training rooms, where one person was the instructor and they could teach all the newcomers anything they've learned. And that was one thing about MGO, is it had a really steep learning curve, so that might have made some people quit. An item I'd like to see come back to the reward shop for female characters whenever they come out with those is the frog suit or Haven Trooper suit. And it looks a lot like the equipment that the guys are wearing, so it would fit right in. But also the hockey mask, that was one of my favorite things to wear. If tournament prizes are not in the reward shop, I'd like to at least see the old ones in there, like the white beret. I also tweeted about this already, but I'll still include it in the video, but don't allow players to manually adjust their upload speed. They abuse that option to lag on purpose. I had an idea for a side mission in the single player where Snake could hunt down 5 guys that are wearing the stealth camo suits, and this would be like a reference back to the first Metal Gear Solid where Otacon made the 5 prototype stealth suits. And to make it more challenging though, I think that Snake's night vision goggles should be damaged, like in a little cut scene where it would be similar to the intro cutscene of Metal Gear Solid 2 where his stealth camo got damaged. That would make it a little more challenging, and it would be like an offline version of Team Sneak. And maybe if it's too hard for you to find the guys, you could bring in a support buddy like Quiet. And you know, the idea would be to not kill them, but stun them and then Fulton them back to Mother Base. Well, I think that just about covers every possible thing I can think of now. So it's up to Kojima Productions, LA and Japan to decide whether or not any of my ideas get put in the game. I really hope they consider putting a big portion of them in there. I'd be surprised if none of them were in there, but I'd also be surprised if all of them were in there. And you know, if that happened, I'd be one happy Metal Gear fan. But besides that, gameplay design is looking top notch. It looks like it's going to be easily the best Metal Gear in the series. I know there is some confirmation from Kojima Productions Japan that they will be making changes to the playability and some changes or more options to the controls. That was confirmed back at E3 over 6 months ago. You can watch the video on Game Trailers. It's an interview with Kojima and Jeff Keighley, and they said they received a lot of feedback through probably Kojima Station. That's where I sent all of my feedback. And you know, the last couple of videos is just a visual representation of all that feedback, and besides that I made a few other changes. I figured out some things that would be better. And if people could just see what I'm talking about, they get a better idea of why I think some things should be changed or some old things added back in and new things added to give the player more options, because more options is never a bad thing. I just don't know exactly what control changes and playability adjustments they're making. Hopefully it's a lot of the stuff I've suggested, but you know, while the game is still in development, I figured I might as well submit a last-minute video to say, you know, hey, I think you should do this. I don't think I've ever anticipated a game coming out this much, and I think a big reason why is because I've never had to wait this long. I mean, by the time the game comes out, it'll be 3 years since I played MGO and 7 years since the last main Metal Gear game besides Peace Walker, but even if you do count Peace Walker, it's still been 5 years, and that's still the longest I've ever had to wait. I could really use a Phantom Cigar, that way I could fast forward the time to when the game releases. Regardless of how the game turns out, I know it'll be great in one way or another, and I can't wait to play it. So I'll end it with that, and thank you for watching.